The notification came through at 11:51 at night. I was still awake working on the final details for the acquisition of the old Harbor District warehouses when my phone lit up on the desk. It was a text from my sister Brianna. No pleasantries, no late-night check-in, just a photo. It was a screenshot of a contract clearly signed hiring a private investigator named Douglas. Underneath the image, she'd typed a caption that made the air in my penthouse feel suddenly thin. "I'm exposing your little homeless charade at Grandma's Jubilee. Dad agrees it's time the family cut the dead weight." I stared at the screen. The cruelty was so specific, so calculated. They weren't just planning to cut me off. They were organizing a public execution of my character at the biggest social event of our family's year. Grandma Beatrice's 75th Jubilee was sacred ground, and they were going to use it to bury me. A few seconds later, another notification popped up. My mother, Stephanie, had hearted the message. That little red heart felt like a bullet. Before I tell you how I dismantled them piece by piece, drop a comment. Where are you listening from right now? I want to know who's in my corner tonight. I didn't cry. I didn't throw my phone across the room or call my best friend in a panic. I just felt a strange cold efficiency settle over me. The air in the penthouse didn't feel thin anymore. It felt like oxygen. I sat down at my desk, the glass surface cool under my palms, and woke up my laptop. If Brianna wanted a war about assets, I would give her one. But first, I needed to audit the battlefield. I logged into the secure portal for Aura Holdings, my real estate firm. My family thought I was struggling bouncing between temp jobs and friends' couches. They didn't know that for the last 5 years I hadn't just been surviving, I'd been buying. I owned 3 commercial blocks in the Loop 2 historic hotels and a portfolio of luxury event spaces. I navigated to the contracts folder and searched for the Glass Conservatory. It was the crown jewel of the Gold Coast, a historic botanical garden encased in crystal, the exact venue Brianna had bragged about booking for Grandma's Jubilee. The file opened. There it was. The rental agreement signed 6 months ago. Tenant Brianna Miller. Landlord Aura Holdings. She had been negotiating with my staff for months. She had signed a contract that listed me indirectly as the owner of the ground she planned to stand on to destroy me. I stared at her signature, that loopy, childish scrawl she used on everything from credit card slips to birthday cards. That's when the realization hit me. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. For years, I'd asked myself why. Why were they so cruel? Why did they need to believe I was a failure, even when I showed signs of progress? Why did my mother heart a message about destroying her own daughter? It wasn't because they hated me. It was because they needed me. They were trapped in a cycle of normalized cruelty. In any closed system, like a family, roles are assigned to maintain stability. Brianna was the golden child, the success story, the wellness influencer who needed to be adored. But you can't have a winner without a loser. You can't have a queen without a peasant. For Brianna to feel superior, someone had to be inferior. For my parents to feel like successful guardians of a prodigy, they needed a disaster to compare her to. I wasn't a person to them. I was the control group in their experiment of self-worth. My failure was the structural load-bearing wall of their entire identity. If I was successful, if I was actually doing better than Brianna, their entire worldview would collapse. They didn't attack me because I was weak. They attacked me because deep down they were terrified I might be strong. I looked back at the lease agreement. My signature was at the bottom, hidden behind the corporate seal. I wasn't the dead weight. I wasn't the homeless charity case. I was the landlord. And they were just bad tenants who were about to be evicted. I closed the laptop. I didn't need to scream. I just needed to wait. To understand why I didn't scream, you have to understand the architecture of my silence. It wasn't something I was born with. It was something I built brick by brick over the last 5 years. While Brianna was curating her life for an audience of bots and bot followers, I was building an actual life in the shadows. My sister's career as a wellness influencer was a masterful illusion funded entirely by the bank of mom and dad. They paid for the yoga retreats in Bali, the organic meal delivery services, the staged photo shoots and rented lofts. They called it investing in her brand. They told their friends at the country club that Brianna was a digital entrepreneur. When I tried to talk about my first renovation project, a dilapidated brownstone I bought with my own savings, my father interrupted me to ask if I could help Brianna format her newsletter. "She's the creative one," he'd said, dismissing my blueprints with a wave of his hand. "You're more administrative." Administrative. That was their word for me. Boring. Reliable. Invisible. So I became invisible. I stopped coming home for holidays. I stopped sharing my wins. When I closed on my first commercial building, I celebrated alone with a bottle of champagne and a view of the skyline I was slowly buying up. When Aura Holdings acquired its competitor, making me the youngest female real estate mogul in the Gold Coast district, my mother didn't know. She was too busy liking Brianna's post about manifesting abundance. But the silence wasn't just about protection, it was about survival. 2 years ago, I found out my parents were underwater. They had leveraged everything to keep up appearances and fund Brianna's lifestyle. I saw the foreclosure notice on Richard's desk during a rare visit. They were 3 months away from losing the family home. They didn't tell me. They didn't ask for help. They were too proud to admit failure to the administrative daughter. So I did what I always did. I fixed it from the dark. I set up a shell company and purchased their debt. I paid off the arrears and restructured their mortgage with an anonymous private lender, me. I saved them from humiliation not because they deserved it, but because I refused to let them fall. I told myself it was a sunk cost, the price of keeping the family intact. I was the silent investor in a business that had never paid me a dividend of love. I snapped back to the present, looking at the text message on my screen. Brianna wasn't done. A new notification popped up from Instagram. She had posted a story, a black screen with white text, the universal signal for manufactured drama. Dealing with toxic family members who lie about their income is exhausting. Protecting my peace. She was escalating. She wasn't just attacking me privately, she was priming her audience. She was building a narrative where she was the victim of my deception. She truly believed I was destitute, and she hated me for it. She hated that I was a burden, a stain on her perfect aesthetic. And the irony was suffocating. She was using a phone paid for by the trust fund I replenished to complain about my poverty. My father left a voicemail a minute later. I didn't listen to it, but the transcript scrolled across my screen. Don't make a scene when Brianna presents her findings. Just accept the help we offer after. We love you, Mackenzie, but we can't enable your delusions anymore. They were giddy. I could feel it through the text. They weren't dreading the intervention. They were anticipating it. They wanted the release of finally putting me in my place. They wanted to save me because saving me made them feel superior. They had no remorse. They had no idea that the ground they were standing on, the house, the venue, the lifestyle, was all held up by the daughter they were planning to destroy. I closed the browser. The endure phase was over. I had the receipts. I had the deed. And now, thanks to their arrogance, I had the moral high ground. 48 hours before the Jubilee, the game changed. It stopped being a family squabble and became a criminal investigation. I was in my corner office at Aura Holdings reviewing the final guest list for a charity gala I was actually hosting, not the fake one Brianna was pretending to organize, when my assistant buzzed in. "There's a man here to see you, Miss Miller." "A Mr. Douglas. He says it's regarding a security breach." I didn't have a security breach. I knew exactly who he was. I'd seen his name on the contract. Brianna texted me. The private investigator. "Send him in," I said. I didn't call security. I didn't lock the door. I turned my monitor away and waited. Douglas looked exactly like you'd expect, tired eyes, a suit that was expensive but worn the posture of a man who had seen too many lies to be surprised by anything. But when he walked into my office, he paused. He looked at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. He looked at the awards on the shelf, the architectural models on the side table, the nameplate on my desk. He looked confused. "You're Mackenzie Miller," he stated, not asking. "I am." "And you're the man my sister hired to prove I'm sleeping in a shelter." He let out a short, dry laugh and sat down without being asked. He placed a thick manila folder on the glass desk between us. "I was hired to find a grifter," he said, his voice gravelly. "I was told you were a liability. A squatter. Someone unstable who needed to be removed from the family. Trust for her own good." He tapped the desk. It took me about 4 hours to realize that was a lie. It took me 24 hours to realize I was investigating the wrong sister. I stayed silent. In negotiations, the first person to speak loses leverage. "I don't like being used," Miss Miller Douglas continued. "And I certainly don't like being paid with dirty money. It puts my license at risk." "Dirty money?" I asked. "My retainer," he said. "It didn't come from a personal account. It didn't come from your parents. It came from a 501c3 nonprofit." He slid the folder across the desk. I opened it. It wasn't a dossier on me, it was a dossier on Brianna. I flipped through the pages, and the cold feeling in my chest turned into ice. Bank records, wire transfers, invoices for consulting fees that went straight into Brianna's personal checking account, and the source, the Young Designers Scholarship Fund. Grandma Beatrice's legacy. For 30 years, my grandmother had poured her heart into that fund. It was meant to send underprivileged kids to art school. It was sacred. And Brianna, the golden child, the wellness influencer who preached about abundance and light, had been draining it dry. She's embezzled $75,000 over the last 18 months, Douglas said, reading the numbers upside down. She used it to pay for her lifestyle. The clothes, the trips, the engagement party. And she used it to pay me to destroy you. I looked at the numbers. $75,000. That wasn't just theft, that was a felony. That was prison time. Brianna hadn't just betrayed me. She had betrayed the only person in our family who actually possessed a soul. Why bring this to me, I asked, closing the file. Because the check she wrote me is going to bounce when the feds get involved, Douglas said, standing up. And because I did a background check on the venue for the Jubilee. I know you own the building. I figure you're the only one in this family with the power to actually clean this mess up. He was right. This wasn't just about humiliation anymore. This was an eviction notice for their entire way of life. I looked at the file. It felt heavy like a weapon. I didn't feel angry. I felt the cold, judicial satisfaction of a gavel coming down. Thank you, Douglas, I said. You'll be paid. By me. Consider your contract transferred. He nodded and walked out. I was left alone with the view of the city I owned and the proof that would burn my sister's world to the ground. The silence in the office was absolute. It was the quiet before the kill shot. Saturday night arrived, wrapped in humidity and expectation. The glass conservatory was lit like a jewel box glowing against the dark backdrop of the Gold Coast. From the outside, it looked like a fairy tale. Inside, it was a stage set for a tragedy. I arrived 20 minutes late. I wore black, not morning black, but boardroom black. A tailored silk suit that cost more than Brianna's entire stolen wardrobe. I walked past the valet, past the security guard who nodded at me with recognition he was on my payroll after all, and stepped into the main hall. The air smelled of expensive lilies and desperation. Brianna was holding court near the champagne tower, wearing a white gown that was trying too hard to look innocent. She was laughing that high brittle sound she made when she was nervous. My parents, Richard and Stephanie, flanked her like bodyguards, their faces tight with the strain of maintaining the illusion. Grandma Beatrice sat in the corner, a queen on her throne, watching the room with eyes that missed nothing. When I walked in, the conversation didn't just stop. It died. My mother's smile faltered. My father took a step forward, then stopped, unsure of the terrain. I didn't look at them. I walked straight to the bar, ordered a sparkling water, and turned to face the room. I wasn't hiding. I was waiting. Ladies and gentlemen, Brianna's voice rang out, amplified by the microphone she'd snatched from the DJ. If I could have your attention. She gestured for silence, her eyes locking onto mine with a gleam of manic triumph. Tonight isn't just about Grandma. It's about honesty. It's about clearing the air so our family can heal. She reached under the podium and pulled out a thick manila envelope. Douglas's report. Or at least the report she thought Douglas had written. My sister Mackenzie has been struggling, she said, her voice dripping with fake empathy, and we've enabled her lies for too long. Tonight I'm staging an intervention. I hired a professional to find the truth so we can finally get her the help she needs. She opened the folder. The room was silent enough to hear the paper rustle. She looked down at the first page, a confident smile plastered on her face. According to the investigation, she stopped. She squinted at the paper. She flipped to the next page, then the next. Her smile wavered. Her brow furrowed. The silence stretched, becoming heavy and awkward. According to the investigation, she tried again, her voice shaking. Subject is solely proprietor. She looked up, her eyes wide and terrified. She looked at me. I raised my glass in a silent toast. Read it, Brianna, I said, my voice calm but carrying across the room. What does it say? She couldn't speak. Her brain was malfunctioning. This is what happens when a narcissist faces a reality that doesn't center them. It's not just shock. It's a cognitive break. Brianna had built her entire self-worth on the foundation that she was the success and I was the failure. The words on that page, Aura Holdings' $12 million valuation real estate tycoon, didn't just contradict her plan, they annihilated her identity. She was experiencing a narcissistic injury so severe it was rendering her mute. She couldn't process a world where she wasn't the Sunday eye. "There's a mistake," she whispered, backing away from the microphone. "This isn't. This says she owns the building." "It says a lot more than that," Grandma Beatrice said, standing up. Her voice was steel. "It says my granddaughter Mackenzie built an empire while you were busy spending my money on filters and fraud." The room erupted in whispers. My parents looked from Brianna to me, their faces pale. The illusion was shattering shard by shard. Brianna dropped the report. Papers scattered across the floor, deeds, bank statements, photos of my properties. The evidence of my victory lay at her feet, and she looked like she was drowning in it. I set my glass down. It was time. I walked toward the podium. The sound of my heels clicking on the marble floor echoed in the silence, a steady, rhythmic countdown. Brianna was still frozen, staring at the scattered papers like they were landmines. I didn't help her up. I stepped over the mess she made and picked up the microphone she had dropped. "There's one more thing," I said, my voice level. "Since we're clearing the air." I reached into my blazer and pulled out the second document Douglas had given me, the bank records. I didn't hand them to Brianna. I handed them to Grandma Beatrice. $75,000, I told the room. That's how much my sister stole from the Young Designers Scholarship Fund over the last 18 months. She didn't use it to help kids. She used it to buy the dress she's wearing. She used it to book this venue. She used it to hire a private investigator to destroy me. A gasp went through the room, sharp and collective. Brianna made a noise, a small, strangled whimper. "No," she stammered. "It was a loan. I was going to pay it back." "It wasn't a loan," I corrected her. "It was wire fraud." I turned to my parents. Richard and Stephanie were standing there, looking between me and Brianna, their eyes darting around the room, trying to calculate which daughter was the better investment. I walked up to them and held out the venue contract. "And this," I said, "is the rental agreement for tonight. You didn't rent the glass conservatory from a corporation, Mom. You rented it from me. I am Aura Holdings. And Clause 14 of our agreement clearly states that any illegal activity on the premises constitutes an immediate breach of contract." My mother took the paper, her hands shaking. She looked at the signature at the bottom. Mackenzie Miller. The daughter she had hearted a text about destroying. "You're in breach," I said. "The event is over. Get out." I nodded to Douglas, who was standing by the main doors. He opened them, and 2 uniformed officers walked in. They didn't look at the flowers or the lights. They looked straight at Brianna. As the officers approached her, reading her rights in a low drone that carried perfectly in the silent room, my parents finally moved. But they didn't move toward Brianna. They moved toward me. "Mackenzie," my father said, putting on a smile that looked like a rictus of terror. "Honey, we had no idea. But look at you. You own all this. We knew you had it in you. We were just pushing you. Tough love, right? We're so proud," my mother added, reaching for my arm. "We can fix this. We can handle Brianna, and then we can." I stepped back. The physical revulsion was instant. They were pivoting. In less than 60 seconds, they had abandoned their golden child and were trying to attach themselves to the new host. They didn't care about the theft. They didn't care about the cruelty. They only cared about the power. And now that I had it, they wanted in. "Stop," I said. It wasn't a shout. It was a command. "The silent investment stops today. I bought your debt 2 years ago to save your house. I paid your bills. I kept you afloat because I thought you were just incompetent. But you aren't incompetent. You're parasites." I looked at my father, the man who had called me dead weight. "I'm selling the debt," I told him. "I'm calling in the loans. And I'm blocking your numbers. You have 30 days to vacate the house before the foreclosure process begins again. You wanted to cut the dead weight. I'm doing it for you." "Mackenzie, you can't," my mother pleaded, her voice rising to a shriek as the police handcuffed Brianna. "We're your family?" "No," I said, turning my back on them. "You were just tenants, and you've just been evicted." I walked over to Grandma Beatrice, offered her my arm, and together we walked out of the glass conservatory, leaving my family in the ruins of the party they had thrown to destroy me. It took exactly 7 days to dismantle the rest of the illusion my family had lived in for 30 years. The fallout wasn't loud. It was a quiet, suffocating implosion. My parents, desperate to keep Brianna out of a federal prison cell, liquidated their only remaining asset of value, the lake house in Michigan, where I had spent my summers reading alone while they threw parties I wasn't invited to. They sold it at a loss for a quick cash close. They wired $75,000 back to the young designer's fund before the district attorney could file formal charges. Brianna avoided jail, but she couldn't avoid the social death sentence. Her followers evaporated overnight. Her brand was radioactive. She was back in her childhood bedroom, a 30-year-old influencer with no influence, grounded by the weight of her own entitlement. I sat across from Grandma Beatrice in her study 1 week later. The air smelled of old paper and lavender. On the desk between us sat a cashier's check. $75,000. Restitution. You should keep it, Grandma said, pushing the check toward me. Consider it a consulting fee for saving my legacy. I looked at the check. It represented everything they had stolen. It represented the vacations I didn't take, the clothes I didn't buy, the approval I didn't get. It was the price of my silence returned with interest. But looking at it, I realized something profound. Keeping it would mean I was still part of their transaction. It would mean I was still playing their game, just winning it. No, I said, sliding it back. This isn't for me. This is where I learned the difference between revenge and justice. Revenge is burning down your enemy's house because they burned down yours. It feels good in the moment, but you still wake up surrounded by ash. You're still living in the past, tethered to the people who hurt you by a cord of anger. Justice, true restorative justice, is different. It's the justice of the sower. It's about taking the resources the enemy tried to consume and using them to plant something that will outlive them. Put it back in the fund, I told her. But I want to add to it. I'm matching it. Let's turn the Young Designer's Scholarship into a full endowment. Let's make sure that for the next 20 years, kids who actually have talent, kids who are actually willing to work, get the seat at the table that Brianna tried to buy. Grandma smiled, and for the first time, I saw the family resemblance. Not in the features, but in the steel behind the eyes. The Mackenzie Miller Grant, she mused. Has a nice ring to it. Just the Miller Grant, I corrected. I don't need my name on the door to know I built the house. That evening, I sat in my office at Aura Holdings. The sun was setting, painting the Chicago skyline in bruised purples and golds. My phone lay on the desk. I opened my contacts. I scrolled down to the group labeled Family, Richard, Stephanie, Brianna. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I felt light. I selected the group. I hovered over the delete button. There was no hesitation this time. No wondering if I was being too harsh. No internal monologue asking if I was the problem. I knew who I was. I was the landlord, I was the CEO, I was the sower. I pressed delete. The names vanished. The screen went black. And in the reflection of the glass, I saw a woman who was finally completely free. If you've ever had to build your own table because they wouldn't give you a seat at theirs, share this story. Let them know we see them.